One thing that gives me a lot of inspiration is visiting somebody else's studio. I love to see how they've created a creative space that works for them, how they've set up all the gear, how they routed everything, and how they make it work for them. And also, not to get too heavy, I think that being a synth nerd music producer can be a quite lonely endeavor. So it's so nice to go to somebody else's place, check their stuff out, talk about gear, talk about music, and just geek out. I love that stuff. So that's why I'm so excited that this year's first Summer of Synths video is an in-person studio tour with one of my best YouTuber, synth world music production friends, Aura. And I'm also almost equally excited that Summer of Synths is sponsored by Perfect Circuit. Perfect Circuit is a music store and they have everything from synths, Eurorack to pedals to other music gear. They have good prices, they often run sales, and they also do giveaways. Something you might not know is that they actually ship worldwide and they actually have a store, something which is unusual, and it's nice because you can go there and test gear. So go and check out Perfect Circuit. I've linked all the gear in today's episode in the description, and if you click the links and you buy something, you support BoBeats, Summer of Synths, and future events like this. Now let's head over to Berlin and check out a cool synth studio. I found this weird basement in Berlin, and we are visiting a dear friend of mine. Hello.
Hello, come on in. Welcome to my studio.
Right, so Federico is going to take us through his quite amazing synth setup, and we're just going to try and explain what it does and why it does what it does.
All right, so the idea of the studio was to have everything ready to record in an easy way, everything connected, everything synced, and all the synth going into the desk, the ZAL desk that I recently acquired. And initially I wasn't planning to have that, but then that come into the equation. So now I want all the synth to go through that to have the chance to use.
And it's going into Ableton, right?
Yes,
yeah?
Basically the entire routing is like through those DI that are on the wall. The synth goes inside there, so the signal get balanced. And then they go directly into the patch bay here.
All right.
And from the patch bay, like this row are my synth out, basically. And they go in the second row that are the desk ins. I have 16 input, 4 stereo channel here. So those are 8 input and 8 mono input here. And then the direct out of the channel goes inside the Orion from Antelope that has 32 in and 32 out, so I can record everything separate.
Right, it's this one down here, right?
It's this guy here.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a new one also got recently, which is very useful if you want to record everything separated, especially if you have a lot of effects, because not only I record separately the synth, but also now I have a 6 aux send, means that I can send the signal to 6 different bus. And in the specific, I have on channel 1, on aux 1, I have the Space Echo. On 2, I send to the Eventide H3000. Then on 3, I have the CXM 1978.
Which is really beautiful.
Which is really beautiful. I know you have one, right? It's gorgeous. Then 4, I have this Eventide Space. And 5 is the new Chorus Echo.
Yeah, how is that one?
It's amazing. It's definitely amazing.
It looks amazing.
It's
also expensive, right?
It's very, of course. It's different than the OG. Like it's way more, I think, useful because it's modern and allows you to have more control on the sound. And also it had the chorus. So basically, I'm using it very often. It has its own return channel. Like these 2 guys, the Benny Dub that is on Send 6, it's my dub delay, which I use since ages. And these 2 come into channel 7 and 8 because I want to feedback the signal into them plus EQ them. So basically I have from here to here sound signal, and these
Could you
two are-
perhaps just explain to the people at home why do you want to EQ the effects coming into the board?
It's like if you want to have an idea, for example, if I have this sound, which is the 303, right? And now I'll kill all the send, but I just sending to this guy, so through 6. So first, now it's a very simple one tap delay, right? And usually I feedback into itself to create this sound. There it is, you need to be careful. So basically you can create all of these feedback loop, and it's useful to have an EQ because I can cut the low end. So see how it's more clean than...
I think that's something that people with hardware synth setups that often overlook this aspect, that you have all these cool effects, but you forget that when you're actually producing a track, you want some control over the effects
sound. Yeah, definitely.
And more so than just like having the raw sound out of the box. You want to be able to cut the lows. Maybe sometimes what I do is on a lot of like reverbs, I like to cut some of the highs to just kind of taper them off a bit. Sometimes to make it a little bit more, I don't know, darker sounding.
Yeah, 100%. Now, if you have the luxury or estate to have a lot of channel, I would definitely send each of these effects in their separate channel. That's also because, say, for example, I have this sound here, which is very dry. I'd send it pre-fader so we listen. So this is the sound of the delay. I can decide then to send this effect to another effect. So now, for example, sending it to the 6M and the space. And if I could have other channel, this is a very expensive channel, that's the problem, I would EQ, and so my music really relies on putting together simple sound and a lot of effects and try to EQ and create soundscape with that.
Yeah, because if you don't have like, I can totally see why you would want, like if you could have more channels, that would give you more control over the sound in the end. And when you're doing this or more, I don't know how you describe your music, but there's techno vibes, there's ambient vibes in it. So things tend to get a little bit muddy if you just stack a ton of effects on top of each other. Okay, so that's the whole like signal chain from the synths into the DI box over here, and then it goes into the patch bay, and then into the mixer.
Yeah.
And then into Ableton.
Ableton, like I set up a template, which I have on the two first track is the sync rhythm and sync syntax, is because I sync everything through Overbridge.
Sure.
So when I press play here, everything is synced. But at this moment to record, I changed a little. But anyway, I'll explain that. I have all the separated track here, including a mixer out, because I want, yes, the separate things, but sometimes I like to do performance, so I can record the mix output. So having the entire like things, since it's a good mixer and it had a lot of vibe, I like to have also that, maybe as a reference, so when I do the mixing later, I had the performance and I know what to do. Otherwise I can lose a lot of time. And in the matter of syncing, which was like the main issue at the beginning, I usually used to have the Motu MIDI there, but it was a little cumbersome. Not because it doesn't work, but for me it was too many cable, too many another interface to set up. So it's great, but now I actually send one USB cable to the Analog 4 because it's just the latest machine that I got. So it's the one I'm working with right now. And from here, I start doing a chain of MIDI out. So it goes first in the PC12, because these now control all the parameters of the Analog 4, so I can have the filter, the envelope. And then the MIDI goes in everything else. So it's just like Octatrack, which sequence the performer right now, Then we go on this other side, so one long MIDI cable going to the rhythm. I tried to have it both on different overbridge channel, but the sync was a little not working easy, especially for MIDI feedback and stuff. So I just send one MIDI cable from there, and the MIDI through, then goes on the synth wall here, where I have...
How do you split it in the synth world over here?
What do you mean? Like the MIDI?
You said you have one MIDI cable from the...
Yeah, it goes directly into this guy, the Super 6, and then the MIDI through. Luckily, each synth has the MIDI through. So basically,
You're living dangerously.
I live in dangerous
with the MIDI through.
It probably, for sure, had some degree of latency, but I find out, for example, this is the last. Commas last, and it's a rhythm machine, it's the percons. But when I go after in the session, the latency is not that as a problem. Like we can hear, and everything seems very synced. So
do you have any problems with like CC messages being sent through the devices?
Yes, but that's why for each synth I'll have to go through the setting and be sure that I deactivate the MIDI CC, especially when you sync Octatrack and these, considering they have a lot of MIDI implementation, and I use it a lot. I had to deactivate or change channels, so now I know these are channel 1 to 4. This is other channel, so everything is separated and.
This is why I often recommend beginners to start with like a MIDI splitter or MIDI through box, because what it solves is the problem of like you don't know why something is being affected like down the line of synths. 100%. But I mean, you have a lot of experience, so of course you know how to go through it all and set it up.
I actually have my favorite, this box here, which is. It's crazily good because it's you send one MIDI in and then it's split in 4, and it's actually a passive box. It doesn't need any powering, and this is great for now. I'm fine, and probably would be even smarter if I go out from the master clock, say this, and then at the same time this 4 got 1, 2, 3, and 4. So they're gonna be less
but
latency.
Still, like I think a topic today will be. Why complicate things? Like if it works, it works. Like you're trying to figure out a setup that works for you, but it's also I think your setup is pretty advanced. So for example, a lot of people they don't have like a DI box that, and they don't go into a patch bay. And I think if you were to look back on your like life as a musician, how much does your like knowledge about synths and skill level that you have now, how much does it factor into your ability to create such a big setup, do you think?
It's, I think being always very interested in technology and nerdism about knowing how things work, it grow organically knowing how to set up things. I have to say that one of the struggle, it's always trying to find new setups, and it's really hard to settle and like, okay, I'm gonna stay with these for a while. For example, now I work on this connection and setup for several months, and I'm afraid that I will gonna change something because that's always happened. But
and what happens when you change something?
It's days of despair because it's especially so if you work with just synth and go inside an interface, it's way easier. When a pro desk, come into the equation, then it's way more complicated. You cannot really, or I mean, you can, but it's not advisable to go straight from an instrument into the channel. First, the channel are all balanced, and they have XLR cable, not just jacks. And it's supposed to have a balanced signal. So that's why the best way in this case is have all the outs from the mixer into a patch bay. And we are talking about hundreds of cable that you can see down. All of those big cables are multi-core, means that each one is 8 or 16 cable inside. So we are talking about like a master class in wiring, and I got the desk already with the cable and the patch point, but count like each patch bay is 96 point, and they're all full. So it's 90.
And I think it's important also to note that you work full time with your music. So, I mean, even, of course, you don't have endless supply of time, but you have more time maybe than somebody who's working a full-time job. Somebody who might be watching this channel here and this video, and they might go, oh, this sounds really cool, but very complicated. But you, of course, have more, like a lot of experience, and also do it full-time and time to sort of troubleshoot it.
Yeah, someday I honestly miss the simplicity of my setup in Brooklyn, New York, when I didn't have, when I was just starting, and I have just a table, and it's way more straightforward. You plug some synth, and usually 2 or 3, you go into the sound card, and that's it. When you go this direction, I've been frustrated a lot, and I remember. For a few weeks, I couldn't do any music because I was just like, oh my God, I was nauseated by cabling, figuring out. But again, once everything is done, it allows you a lot of course, possibilities, more possibilities.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, because I can totally relate to having a too large, too frustrating setup. So what is the reason that you still have this?
Few. The one things that I realize, so I do content, but I also am a musician, and I care about the music I do. And one big limit that I have in my production has always been that like it could feel approximative sometimes, like the mixing part, the production part is not as advanced. So I used to just record everything using the Model 1. And the Model 1 doesn't have direct out, so basically everything goes in, and I have just a stereo recording.
Yeah, you don't have any multi-tracking capabilities.
At all, exactly. Yeah. And it doesn't have any pan control. It's very limited. EQ, it sounds amazing, don't get me wrong. But then my track were very like black and white. Like I couldn't really do a lot after the recording. So I think the step, if you want to be a pro, is just like having the chance, if you want, to step up in the production. That doesn't mean that you have to. Sometimes I record stuff as a stereo, single take, and it sounds great. But now I want to have everything on its own channel, and the latest production are really better, I think, and more immersive, more refined. So
yeah, like we talked about earlier, if you're doing music with a lot of like effects like you're doing, of course you need some level of control over that. If you suddenly just have a stereo pair and it's like reverbs and delays and stuff, it easily gets muddy. One, for example, experience I have is when you use Eurorack. I don't know if you have this experience, but a problem for me with Eurorack, which is solvable, but it's something I noticed a lot, is when you start plugging things into each other and it gets muddy really quickly. Yeah. You have to have like the utility stuff, like for example, EQing on Eurorack is super important.
Which not a lot of people do, and like thinking about it, there's not a lot of EQ modules. Like it's not something that you buy, right, in Eurorack.
It's not so sexy.
Yeah, I mean, there's filters that more or less work in the same way, yeah. But I never bought like a EQ module, and considering that sometimes even in this case you go out with a single stereo, you have control on volume. For example, here I use the Endorphin Cockpit as a mixer, yeah. But I can control only like on-off and volume. And for the sound itself, I have to rely only on sound design. Yeah. So if the filter or like the in this case oscillator, I work with this because it grants you a lot of tonal control in harmonic oscillator. But still, it's It would be great probably to work more on the EQ part, especially if you have multi-voice system. When I press it,
okay,
you
okay,
go.
yeah, I'm going.
And boom. All right, so I'm gonna show you and guide you through what is my process when I record. And lately, what I do for music is like I do long jams and then maybe add it later on, because again, I have the chance to have everything separated. So I usually use my Octatrack as a player for found sound or like field recording. So usually I like to set up something that sounds like this, EQ a little the low end to remove the low end, and have something that set the mood. Now in this case it's just like some field recording. And then I usually try to start with some atmospherical pad or theme. In this case, I have something going on in the analog 4. So I have this sort of low note just made just with one note on track 1. The analog 4 goes inside the amazing Godfather, which is a 4-channel delay, saturator, mixer, reverb. It does a lot of stuff. And basically I'm using the out of the analog 4 here. The 4 out goes inside the 4-channel here and then back into the analog 4. So it's a loop, and I can affect things easily. So right now with the PC12, I can control also. I mapped everything, like this is my filter envelope, and these are the effects send. So I can start jamming and create variation, which I can later on cut and reuse depending on the mix.
Do you usually like record an entire like session that is a completed track, or do you more record like bits and pieces and cut it together later, or is it a mix?
I try always to do a performance because I know that. So I know that I have only 2 hands, so I cannot keep modulating everything, and so some part is gonna be more dull. But I try to figure it out. Okay, this is gonna be my intro, so I wanna play with this sound, which is simple, but sounds nice to me. And then I know that I have another sequence going on track 2. No, actually I don't. So I can put it down. So sure. Also to show like I am very fast in like trying to figure it out, I would start doing these, and then I can quantize the scale in minor, of course, C minor always, and I can do like just rotating these. I can change the
So what did you just do?
I just put some random trick, which is the favorite things I do. I just put random things down, and then with a quantized scale, I change the pitch, rotating the knob, mostly randomly, but I hear what's happening and I then react. It's a dialogue, constant dialogue, like until I find something that I like. And I usually try to get to a point that I like. For example, now, and then I can put a slide, I can put accent.
Yes, nice.
And so now we are already into like the track. We create the situation, everything is separate, so I don't really care if things are not precise as I want. And now I can start thinking of introduce a rhythmical element. So I have the rhythm and the percons. I set up something, so I can rather go, this is the percons. As you can hear, even using all the MIDI through, everything is synced pretty nicely. Then later on I will check on the DAW for sure. And then there's the effect part. So now I can affect, for example, the percons with some spring reverb. Or I can send it to the dub delay. Let me turn off everything before. So now I can have things like that, and I don't mind that is not precise, because it's part of the performance to have something organic, and then maybe I will...
Do you feel that sometimes electronic music gets too rigid, stale, that there's this problem?
Yeah, and it was my problem too, like the loop problem. Like we end up with tons of nice loop, but what I'm trying to do, and what I learn also talking with a lot of artists here at Riverside, is the fact that the arrangement is everything. Like, yeah, you can have amazing loops or amazing sounding things, and that's a good start. But then you need to arrange and make things flow into each other constantly. And with a mixer, it's nice because you can start play with the effects, and then you can start to add other elements. And like the kick can come in.
And the kick is from the analog grid?
Yeah.
I don't know why I could identify that. Maybe I've been using Electron Gear for a while.
It's my favorite kick ever come from this machine. I really love how it sounds. And even in this case, I can play with the kick, like add some reverb or even the delay or some... You never had a reverb, right? But whatever. I like actually spring reverb on the kick. It gives this nice, interesting high end.
Are you using the effects track on this one?
No, because I know that I actually, not on the kick goes separately out and not in the main. The other, I'm just using now two sounds, because to just do a simple thing. I'm not using any effects from the inside, because, so this is like what I have there, so like this.
Like percussive blips and bloops.
Yeah. And I prefer to use it, the effects here, but I could also send those to some delay or reverb inside the machine. But anyway, like this, like the track, it's the matter of making grow up, and then I have two more elements that I can bring in, and one is my trusty 303, the Avalon. So I can remove the kick, for example. And I have this new line, I can play with some delay. And here, like, I can cut out all the low end. So I can create this, like, constant soundscape. And now I can also, I have this element here that it's a little strong, but it's nice. I can reintroduce then the kick. And this is an arpeggio made with the UDO Super 6. They just announced the new model, and I'm a little sad because now I want it.
And it costs an arm and a leg.
I didn't check how much it cost.
A lot.
Probably double of this, so I'll be fine, I guess. But anyway, this is Sync 2, and I'm using the arpeggiator.
Yeah.
So I like sometimes to have this element like this, and then at the right moment I bring back the kick, for example. And I can decide to, now it's in 12 step, I can add more kick. And from here now, it's again trying to modulate everything and evolve the track. So I would record like 15, 20 minutes of it, and then go back in the session and cut everything. And one trick that I learned, it's, yes, I have a lot of effects, but to try to use the effects only. For example, if I want to use this reverb as a send, I will use it with just one instrument, because if I send many instruments to it, then later on I could not use it.
Yeah, and it also tends to muddy things a lot. I don't know why it is, but I think like a lot of I think that's one thing that the DAWs usually do a little bit better in terms of like clarity of sound when you're sending multiple sources to like one effect. I don't know why it is with hardware effects, but oftentimes I feel like it probably has to do with like the headroom.
If you have good mixer like this one, these are a lot of headroom, so it goes. You need to push it a lot to make it very muddy, but yeah, like how many instruments I'm using? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So at this moment I have just 6 instruments and 6 octave fets. So it's, you know, I could separate things easily and have each one treated separately.
And then if I understand you correctly, like what you like to do is then you work for a while with a setup like this. And I guess when you get bored or feel it's time, you just kind of switch it up. You have some moments of anxiety and frustration, and then you make it work again eventually.
I sadly change too much and always try to find what is the next synth that I want. But in the end, I always get back to the few things that I really know and I really love and makes my signature kind of sound, which I have to admit at this point is sort of my style. And it's very, I try to push outside my style and try to cover other territories, but it's always end up not feeling honest to myself. So if it's something commercial, like I have to score for a commercial or a movie, then I try to use different things and get out of the comfort zone. But if it's for my music, it's better to stick with the things you know and you love and you just really are part of your voice, I think.
But I guess if you don't try new things, you also don't know what truly works for you. Like I have the exact same experience that I test a ton of gear, but you often end up going back to a few pieces that you really feel strongly about. Exactly. But I'm not sure that I would feel as strongly about those pieces if I hadn't tried like different gear and seeing where like what works for me. And I think that's also why it's so important to acknowledge that it's not like you've showed us here today. It's not a straightforward process where you just go from a better setup to a better setup to a bigger setup. It's a lot of back and forth.
It's also interesting to think about it, like few elements here. So my followers know the Octatrack. I bought it for 4th time and sell it for 4th time. The 5th time was the good
story.
one. And this is also interesting. I had the analog for 3 years ago for 2 days, and I honestly didn't like it. I thought it was a poly synth, and it is poly, but it's a 4-voice synth. And at that moment, I don't get what is the reason to have this machine. So I send it back. Then Electron reached out, knowing that I was using the Performer, and I'm a big Electron fan, and say, man, you need to try it because it really falls into what your music is. And now I'm like blown away by this machine. So it came in a moment where I didn't know what I wanted to do. Now it came back when I know that my music revolves around usually 4 voices, and that's why the Performer was my main instrument. It will still be. But this one has 4 voices plus a lot of tons of possibility. So now I know how to use it, and now I'm loving it. So I guess it's not a linear process in know what you can use or not. Maybe that at a certain moment don't work for your ideas or the place you are musically, and then in few years you evolve in something else, and now it's the moment for that.
I mean, it's like painting, you know, just because you can paint with all different colors and you can paint with all types of paint, it doesn't mean that you will use all of that all the time in every single thing. It's like you go through phases of different kinds of expressions, I think. And I think the instruments here that you showed us and the setup kind of highlights this, that it's something evolving, and I think that's the joy of hardware.
Yeah, definitely.
So thank you so much, Federico, for having us as a guest in your studio, for talking to us, and where can people find you online?
You can find me on Instagram, Aura Music, YouTube, Aura Music 2, and then on all the music streaming, it's just Aura. I'm all over, so it's gonna be easy.
Yeah, go and check him out.